Hi, welcome back to Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. Today's lesson is key signatures. So the objectives for this lesson are, first we're going to understand why we use key signatures, and then we're going to kind of draw on the previous lesson and derive key signatures based on major and minor scale patterns as one way of figuring key signatures out. And then we'll look at a second way to derive key signatures based on the circle of fifths. And of course, this work will be kind of the prelude to memorizing these key signatures and just knowing them by rote. So why do we use key signatures? So let's say if we have some music, and I'll just write some notes up here. And it's got a lot of accidentals in it. So I've just written some notes and added some accidentals, and it turns out that this is, of course, not in C major, but in E major. So it becomes a lot easier to write this music, less tedious and more understandable if we, instead of including every time we have the note F sharp, instead of having to write it with the sharp in front of it, or every time we have a G sharp, writing a G sharp, we can move these commonly used accidentals into the what we call the signature over here. So this music had an F sharp, a G sharp, a C sharp, and a D sharp. And then in the bass clef it would look like this. And now we can write these notes without worrying about adding accidentals to them, because it's understood that while we're in this key signature, that these notes, this is not an F but an F sharp. And the reason it makes it more understandable is that we can then relate this to what we know about major scales, and the music becomes more interchangeable. Like we see that this, instead of thinking about this as an E, we can think about it as the tonic, or kind of the home scale degree, and the other notes relate around it, just like they would in C major or D major or any other key. So let's look at some of the scale patterns that we saw in the last lesson and use those to help us find key signatures. So if we remember, the major scale goes from C to C on the white notes of the piano. So we've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So let's write that here. F, G, A, B, C. And so we see that the pattern of whole and half steps, the way they are, means that there's a half step here and a half step here. So now let's say we want to find the key signature for a different key, like let's go up a step to D major. So what that means is, first we would use this scale pattern to find a D major scale. So we need to have a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So it corresponds exactly to these steps in the C major scale. And so let's find that. So D whole step would be E, so that's fine. And then a whole step from E would be going to this F sharp. So we need to add one sharp. And then we need a half step, so F sharp to G. And then a whole step, G to A, whole step, A to B. And then a whole step, B to C, so it needs to go to a C sharp. And then a half step, so that's fine. So here are the half steps. So we see that there are two sharps in this D major scale, one on F sharp and one on C sharp. So if we were going to write this key signature, we would write, starting with the F sharp always to C sharp, and then F sharp, and C sharp. So this is one way to derive a major scale key signature. And if we were doing it for a minor scale, remember we had those three forms of the minor scale. Minor key signature. We would always use the natural minor form to find. So all the white notes from A to A would be transposed to a scale. Okay, now let's look at a different, probably more common way to find key signatures, which is to make a chart called the circle of fifths. And this is a great tool to use to get familiar with key signatures and memorize the number of sharps and flats. So we'll make a circle with the keys related to each other in fifths. So I'll start with C at the top. And we can also add the minor keys that have the same key signatures, which are called the relative minors. So C major or A minor. And then we're going to move a fifth up, so we can use this keyboard to help us find what notes to write. So C, D, E, F, G. So we'll write a G here, and the relative minor is E. And the way that I find the relative minors is I go back a third, so C to A and G to E, and it should always be a minor third. So now we want to go a fifth up from G, so 1, 2, 3, G, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So D, and the relative minor turns out to be B. And then we want to go up 5 from D, so D, E, F, G, A. So A, and then the relative minor is here, which is an F sharp. And then we want to go up a fifth from A, so A, 2, 3, 4, 5 is E, and the relative minor is C sharp. And now, starting on E, up a fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is B, or G sharp minor. And then from B, up a fifth is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we need to move to F sharp again because of the half steps involved here. So there's 2 half steps between B and F, so we need to add a half step back to make sure we've got the same number of steps in this fifth. So F sharp or D sharp minor. And if you're not sure how to figure out the natural or the relative minor of the key, don't worry about it for now. We're just going to make this circle of fifths once and then use it and memorize it. So F sharp, and then we're going to move up a fifth from F sharp, which is C sharp, or A sharp minor. And now to continue, instead of moving up in sharps, we're going to switch over to flats. So starting on B, we can think about B as also being C flat minor. So C flat or A flat minor. And then F sharp, of course, could also be considered G flat minor or E flat minor. So for instance, taking this F sharp note here, you can think about it as either a raised F or a lowered G. And then the same can be said of this C sharp. It could also be a D flat. So this could be D flat major or B flat minor. And then we're going to continue moving in fifths. So from D flat, we go to A flat or F minor. And then from A flat up 2, 3, 4, 5 to E flat or C minor. And then from E flat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to B flat or G minor. And finally, from B flat, we go to F or D minor. So here is the circle of fifths, and remember that there's a part where the circle kind of overlaps, and this is because these keys are said to be enharmonic. So that means that they start on the same note on the keyboard, but they have different letter spellings. So now this circle kind of completes itself, and we see that it helps us to understand how many sharps and flats the keys have, because here there's 0, here there's 1 sharp, here there's 2 sharps, 3 sharps, 4 sharps, 5, 6, and then all 7 sharps. And then going the other way are the flats, so from C to F, so here's 1 flat, 2 flat, 3 flat, 4 flats, 5 flats, 6 flats, and then C flat having all 7 notes flat. So this is a great resource for understanding the key relationships, so the relative minors of the major keys, and also the number of sharps and flats. And the only thing that's left to do is to memorize and understand the order that the sharps and flats come in. So let's do an example of finding a key signature the way we did first with the transposing the major scale pattern. So let's say we're asked to find an A major scale. So first thing we can do is write the notes from A to A. So, and we're being asked to find the key signature. So if we remember, the major scale pattern is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And if you weren't sure, you could again check the steps from C to C, the white notes on the keyboard. So let's make sure that this matches with that. So from A to B is a whole step, so that's fine. And then from B to C is a half step. We need it to be a whole step, so we'll raise the C to C sharp. And then a half step here from C sharp to D, so that's fine. And then a whole step, D to E. And then a whole step from E to F, so we need this to be an F sharp. And then from F sharp to G is a half step, but we need a whole step, so we'll make it a G sharp. And then finally a half step from G sharp to A. So again, the half steps are here and here. And now we need to figure out what accidentals we've got and how many of them there are. So there's 3, so we've got a C sharp, an F sharp, and a G sharp. And so the order to write those again is always to start with the F sharp and then go down to C sharp, and then the G sharp comes here. And then the same arrangement for the bass clef, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp. So here's our A major key signature. Okay, for the second example, let's do an example in minor. So let's say we're asked for the key signature of D minor. So we know that I mentioned earlier that you need to use the natural minor pattern to find minor key signatures. So the natural minor pattern is whole, half, and then whole, oops. So again, I'm just taking the notes from A to A. So whole, half, whole, whole, half, and then whole step, whole step. So now we can write the notes from D to D. And make sure that we have this arrangement. So D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, so that's fine. F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, and then we need a half step between A and B, which means we need to lower this B to a B flat, and then a whole step between B flat and C, and one between C and D. So it turns out that there's one accidental in this scale, B flat, so our key signature for D minor is going to be 1 flat, B flat. Okay, for the third example, let's say we're asked to find the key signature for E major. And now let's use the circle of fifths method. So we know that the circle starts with C major and it moves up in fifths. So let's count up in fifths until we get to E. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're at G major, and we know that that must have 1 sharp. And now we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're at D major, which has 2 sharps. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's an A major, which has 3 sharps. And then we can go from A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're on an E. So we know that the key signature for E must have 4 sharps. So now the only question is, what are the sharps going to be? And the only way to know that is to memorize the order of writing the sharps. So starting with an F sharp to a C sharp to a G sharp to a D sharp. And one way to know this is that the last sharp that you write in any key signature, sharp, is always going to be the leading tone. So the tone that's a half step below the tonic or the home note. So in this case, D sharp, which is a half step below E. So you can write the sharps in fifths: F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and stop on D sharp because it's a half step below E. Okay, and for our fourth example, let's find a minor key signature using the circle of fifths. So let's say we're asked to find B minor. So B minor. So we remembered, again, just even remembering the first pair of keys, which is C major and A minor. So they always move up by fifths. So now we can start on A minor and move up by fifths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're at E minor, and we know that that has 1 sharp because this has 0. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're on B, and we know that it must have 2 sharps. So again, we know that the order of sharps is F sharp to C sharp if you're writing 2 sharps. So here's our key signature for B minor. All right, thanks for watching Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. See you next time.